and welcome to Cavan TV. I'd like to say thank you to Positive Age for the use of the studio here in Drummondlea, Cavan. Well, what a fantastic 4 days we've had in Cavan this week. Cavan calling. So many things. Sir Bob Geldof? Yeah. One of the main things as well that was celebrated in Cavan calling was the 100 years birthday of Breffni Park. And this evening in studio, I've got George Cartwright, who is a retired primary school principal and has spent many years working in the GAA in Cavan. And George has his book, Breffni Park to Kingspan Breffni. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Áine. How are you?
Your fourth book.
Yes, that's my fourth.
Your fourth GAA book. It was a great weekend. My goodness, wasn't it? The ecumenical mass and the parade, which the rain rained on right up to town. Wasn't that absolutely wonderful?
It was. It was a great week for both Cavan calling and indeed for the GAA and Breffni Park. And as you said, the economical service on Saturday, it really was lovely. And to see the cathedral full, so many representatives of all the clubs in Cavan, the parade up to Kingspan Breffni. Yes, there was a very heavy rain on the way up, but children don't mind. And once they got up to the park and shook themselves down and a little bit of sun came out, so things brightened up.
Your book, Breffni Park to Kingspan Breffni, celebrating 100 years. Why did you do this book? How did it come about?
Yes, well, it's a good question, Áine. Our esteemed PRO of the GAA in Cavan, Susan Brady, asked me around, I'm not sure when, maybe the very beginning of last year, reminded me that the centenary was coming up this year and would I consider doing a little book for it. And I said, I'm not sure, Susan. That's the first I thought of it. And she said, well, maybe something small. So I thought about it for a while, and then I suppose began to do something on it, and it got bigger as I went along. And then the fact, as we turned into 2023, the centenary wasn't too far away, so I had to rush at that stage and get it out, and to coincide with last week, and that's, I suppose, where it came.
Fantastic launch of your book in the library last Thursday evening, wasn't it?
No, actually in Kingspan Breffni.
In Kingspan Breffni, sorry. Yeah. Now, to get back to 1923, right, tell us, what was it 100 years ago? What was Breffni Park like? Who owned it? What was it like? What kind of football was played there? Who played there? What was it like?
Yeah, well, of course, 100 years ago, there was a couple of fields there, green fields. It was owned by a man called Rye Taylor, who actually lived in Australia. And Cavan GAA, for 20 years prior to that, they had use of the showgrounds, which would now be known to people as Terry Kyle Park. And it was owned at the time by the Cavan Agricultural Show Society, who each year ran an agricultural show for Cavan. And the GAA, for I suppose 20 years before the opening of Breffni Park, they rented the field on occasions from the Agricultural Society to play their football games. And a lot of county finals were played there. Some Ulster championships were played there. And an Ulster final was actually played there in the old showgrounds. And it served the needs of the GAA in Cavan for at least 20 years, up to the opening of Breffni Park. Now, why did Breffni Park come about? Well, Cavan footballers on the field, playing in the blue jersey, representing the county, were doing very well in Ulster. They were winning frequently in Ulster, but when they went to play All-Ireland semi-finals in Croke Park and in Navan, where some of the games were played, they were falling short. And it was soon copped by the people in charge that the showgrounds really was too small and Cavan GAA needed a field of their own. And a grounds committee consisting of 6 men was asked to come together in December 1922 to seek out a suitable venue for a new park for Cavan GEA and to oversee its development. And the 6 men were Paddy Baxter from the parish of Templeport, Paul McShane from Cornafane, Michael Corr from Lacken, Andy McEntee from Cavan Town, Phil Ruddy from Cavan Town, and Michael J. Lynch from Baileyborough. And they had their inaugural meeting in December 1922, and they set about seeking suitable fields, and they targeted these 2 fields in the townland of Creighton. And when they looked about buying it, seeing would it be for sale, the man who owned it lived in Australia, so negotiations with him had to be in by cable or wire, as the old people called it. Now there was a problem. The man who had possession of the fields at the time was James Simons from Cavan Town, who was actually renting the land, and he didn't want to vacate it. So after a lot of toing and froing, and to make a long story short, they eventually got to the situation where they could buy it, and they bought it. They bought those 2 fields plus another field up at the junction at Tractor Motors overseeing the Green Lake, and Cavan GEA bought those 3 fields for about £700 in December 1922, January 1923. And later on they sold the field at Tractor Motors, which we now call Tractor Motors, and they had the whole lot for about £340. So they had 2 decent fields there, and they employed a local contractor here in Cavan Town, Thomas McManus, to develop the actual 2 fields into one. That he did. And it was an extraordinary achievement, because 6 months later
they opened the field 1923.
Exactly, in July. And we have to consider that during those times it was a difficult time politically in Ireland. Ireland had just come out of the War of Independence, but the Civil War during that period was still raging. And those 6 men that were entrusted with seeking out the new pitch had deep-seated political allegiances and deep-seated political views, because it was only a year or so since the treaty had actually been ratified. So they were able to park their political differences, leave them to one side, and work for the betterment of Cavan GEA, which was a fantastic achievement. And as you said, Áine, on the 22nd of July 1923, the park was officially opened for the first time.
Exactly 100 years.
100 years.
Right. Can I just ask you, like, the game would have been different than it is now?
Ah, yeah, the game would have been much different. Many of the games are low scoring. I know we talk nowadays about defences and all that type of thing. Obviously it was catch and kick.
But obviously the love was there to build it and to build a park like that.
Oh, the foresight and the vision of the county board at the time, the officers, men like Seamus Gilheany, B.C. Benny Fay, Paddy Riley, who was treasurer for something like, he was a county board officer for 57 years, and he was treasurer for many, and another man, Jack Clark. Now they were the leading officers at the time, and they had great vision to first of all choose the actual 6 who sat on the grounds committee, and to give them the go ahead to pursue and seek out land for development. Their hope and their ambition was that with a bigger field, a field owned by the county board, that Cavan might win in All-Ireland. Now, it took 10 years. Cavan won their first All-Ireland in 1933, but it is a tribute to the men that their dream came true.
Actually, they did so well that it became known as the Crow Park of the North.
That's true, Áine. When Breffni Park was opened, there was nothing like it in the top half of the country other than Crow Park, and it was the venue for many important games. For example, there were 3 All-Ireland senior football semi-finals played in Breffni Park, which is extraordinary when you think of it now. In 1928, Cavan played Sligo in the All-Ireland semi-final there. In 1931, Cavan played Kildare in the All-Ireland semi-final in Breffni Park. And the big one, in 1933, Cavan played Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final in Breffni Park. Kerry were All-Ireland champions. They were going for 5 in a row. They were looked on as unbeatable, out-and-out favourites. The newspaper, the Kerry Man of the time, in a preview of the game said, "We always had very good footballers, but we never had better than now." They came to Breffni Park and Cavan beat them in an All-Ireland semi-final. It was shattering for Kerry. It was a huge shock, but it was a wonderful achievement by Cavan, and then they went on to win the All-Ireland. There were a lot of other games there. It was a much sought-after venue. The Crow Park of the North, I think, was a nice tag.
I see you had the Garda Sports there as well.
That's right. Football obviously was the main use for Breffni Park, but there were other things as well worth mentioning. The Garda Sports, which ran roughly in Cavan from about 1925 until 1931-32, they attracted competitors from not alone all over Ireland, but indeed from Europe as well. Some Olympic champions took part in the competitions in Breffni Park. Huge occasions for those from Cavan Town and the surround of the county who went in their droves to these competitions.
Now your book, and you go into great detail, you give a history of the founder members that you mentioned there, you get into all of that. But you said, am I right, you concentrated on the first 50 years of its development?
Well, probably...
You delved back into that.
Yes, I would have delved in that in detail, because a lot of the history and the story of those eras would probably not be that well known.
Because of digital time and everything that we have at the moment.
Yes.
But can I ask you a stupid question? Like, how did you do that research? Where did you find that info? Where did you get it from?
Yes.
Did you go through minutes of meetings, or did you go through archives in the library? Where did you get all that info?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Minutes of meetings are few and far between, because there was very, very few minutes kept in those years.
So
they might have been kept, but they're not preserved, put it that way. I would have, obviously, the first source would be the Anglo-Celt. I mentioned Andy McEntee there. He was sports editor of the Anglo-Celt for more years than I can even imagine to say, many, many years. He was a wonderful journalist. He wrote extensively about the GAA in Cavan. He covered meetings, he covered matches, and he wrote column after column. Now, it wasn't all praise. He also criticised the GAA if he had to, but he was a very fair journalist. Now, his writings are a wonderful boon for a historian or for somebody doing research, because he was supportive and wrote about the GAA in an era when most provincial papers gave it lip service. So what he has left behind is a treasure trove for somebody doing research. There are others, magazines, booklets written on the openings of pitches, etc., have touched on it. Then in 1952, there was a nice programme written on the occasion of a second reopening of the park. The GAA in Cavan in 1948 bought 7 acres adjoining the old park. The old park, Áine, lay in an east-west direction, as opposed to the way it lies now, north-south. But in the late 40s, there was further development. The 7 acres were incorporated into the old field, and the field was laid out as we know it today. I should call it a north-south direction.
Okay, so looking through your book, you've got some wonderful photography in the book, and where did you get that from now?
Well, I was lucky to have some good friends that were very generous with their photographs. I'd like to mention in particular Dermot Walsh from Cavan Town, who gave me access to many of his lovely photographs. Micheál Smith, whose family have a very close connection with the scoreboard in Breffni Park. Sorry, not the score. Yes, not the scoreboard. The sound system in Breffni Park.
Right.
Michael is very generous with his photographs as well. Of course, the Walsh family. Dermot and his parents lived beside the park, so they would have a close affinity with it. And I had some photographs from myself, and the county board had some photographs as well.
Well, we're going to shoot up one on the screen there now, and it's hard to imagine with this photograph now. We'll shoot up on screen. Roscommon and Tyrone battle in a Division 2 promotion playoff at Breffni Park, March 1984. And look at that.
Yes.
It looks, if you told me it was 1920 with colour added to it, I would say yeah.
Yeah, and
that's amazing.
That's only 40 years ago.
It's
yeah,
only 40 years ago.
The
We
first
can all
thing,
remember that.
The first thing that strikes on you, I suppose, the number of changes. Breffni Park there looks quite bleak, bare, barren, and it does. It's just a pitch. But I suppose so much work has taken place.
I have to say, photography-wise, throw that in contrast now with the next photograph we're going to throw up, and that's the one of on the cover of your book.
Yeah, well, yes, I got that from a well-known sports journalist and man, Humphrey Kelleher, who wrote a book on the story of the Cups, and now he's doing a story on GA pitches countrywide. And I know him, and he sent me that photograph, and it's lovely.
And then, of course, I like the other one. Like that could be anywhere in the world. If you said that's Dubai, you nearly believe it. It looks wonderful lit up.
Well, that's on the back, and I used that with kind permission and courtesy of Jonathan Malloy here from Cavan Town, who took it with a drone just recently, last January, prior to a Dr. McKenna Cup game that Cavan were playing, I think. Was it Tyrone or
so
whatever.
Get through your, very quickly to get through your 100 years of Breffni Park, and it's in the book there, folks, 100 years, and George has gone into everything in great detail. Let's fly through the 100 years. You know, like we won in All-Ireland, let's face it, but it wasn't in Breffni Park.
No.
It was in the famous Polo Grounds in New York, isn't that right?
That's right.
And but like, let's talk about football now, and the facilities that it is now. Just my little interjection there is, I watched the parade going through town the other day. The 42 clubs, all the children, the under 13 children wearing their clubs and walking through the town, and they were going on to a blitz in Breffni Park. Isn't it just like GAA is there? It is there. It is there in the future. It is going stronger and better than ever.
Absolutely.
And also another thing I'd like to point as well, it's a family occasion.
Yes.
The whole family go to the match. It's a family involvement, and the family, and you know, the neighbourhood supports you as well.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
It's gone from strength to strength.
Yes.
Breffni Park, how is that going to carry that through in the future?
Well, Breffni Park it's a great facility, Áine, for the whole GAA family, and it's there for use for men's teams, ladies football teams, camogie teams, whenever it can be made available. It could be going 7 nights a week, as you can imagine. So I suppose there has to be a conservative policy to keep the pitch reasonably, keep it reasonably in good condition to accommodate the game.
You're not
so
going
it
to
can't
have
be
a concert. You're not going to have a concert on it anytime
Well, I think
soon.
that I think Cavan County Board have plans for a concert next year. I do think that. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's in the pipeline. There is, of course, plans for further expansion up there. The area which is called the Polo Grounds is a large tract of land that has been bought in conjunction with Cavan County Council and the Royal School, and the plan is for further development there across the river, a combined effort, a sort of a sports hub. That'll be a wonderful facility when it's finished.
No, sports hub, like what? You're going to stick to GAA, you're not going to let, you're going to stick to the GAA ethos in there.
Oh, the Cavan GAA from that end of it will, but it will, my understanding of it is, if it's a sports hub, obviously it's going to encompass a lot of acreage, and it will accommodate other sports. It will have to. If it's going to be a sports hub, it'll be much, much broader than GAA. It'll be a facility for other sports as well. But the GAA will obviously be anchor tenants of part of it.
Yeah. Now, this doesn't come cheap. So you have to work on it, raise funds.
Mm-hmm.
The diaspora is called upon.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the diaspora were called upon in particular for the purchase and initial development, as in planning, of the Polo Grounds facility. That has been the story of Breffni Park over the last 100 years on fundraising. We'll go back in time to men going round with bicycles, selling tickets here in Cavan Town for small little wee raffles, few pence a ticket, prizes were minimal. That was the situation for
Many
up until
years.
the 1970s, when grants became, they were given, and leading on now, the sports capitals grants, there's different grants. The Central Council of the GAA, Ulster Council, can give decent grants.
Of course, matches GAA in itself, that generates money
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's. But then, of course,
And
the
also-
money,
Yes,
the
sorry.
money raised is ploughed back into the
it,
association.
but also as well, Breffni Park has gone to Kingspan
Yes.
Breffni now. But also as well, I'm glad to say, on village levels, on townland levels,
Yes.
the smaller clubs are developing as well.
They
They would
are.
have even looked more bleak than that, but
Yeah.
they also are getting their grounds in
Yeah.
shape and building clubhouses and
Yeah.
coming along as well. So it's strong.
Well, a look around the county, Áine, you
Yeah.
will see 2 and sometimes 3 fields at most venues. You will see first-class gyms. Excuse me. You will see walking tracks
Yeah.
on the perimeter of the fields, which are widely availed of by the community, and they grew very popular during COVID, and that
Yeah.
popularity has
Floodlit.
continued. Floodlit,
Yep.
wonderful
Safe.
facilities.
Safe.
You have all weather areas. You have great facilities for young people to use,
And safe.
and you have children from 4 years old using them.
Yeah. As I say, family, using for family.
Yes,
Yeah.
family in particular. Ladies football is so
Let the
popular.
ladies get their chance in
Oh,
there too, yeah.
absolutely. And look at
Even if
Cavan.
it's just to walk around it
But
10 times.
look
some
at
night.
Cavan winning under 16 All Ireland
Absolutely.
last week,
Yeah.
beating Cork, which would dwarf this county so many times as regards playing numbers. But it was a wonderful achievement, and there was no fluke about it, because it took 2 games and Cavan won it. So it's great for the game in the county.
Would you agree with me if I said to you, like, the way life is changing, sometimes every country in the world can be accused of losing their identity, like we've lost our Irish language, and some of us like to speak a little bit of Irish now and again. But like one thing that's inherent in all us Irish is the GAA, isn't it? Aren't we noted for that? Isn't that's a culture that's never going to die? It's never going to be watered down.
It's obviously no. It's never going to. Well, we hope not. It's always going to change, and it has changed considerably. Maybe too much so. Yes, many of the improvements are for the better. There's no question about that. Sometimes we wonder, are all changes and all improvements actually for the better? But maybe that's a debate for another day. But yeah, the thing that we like about the GAA nowadays, it involves so many young people. You have every club catering for their small little children, 3 and 4 years of age, in creches on a Saturday morning, so on and so forth, where all they would be doing is just playing around, having fun. And that continues right up with volunteers, coaches giving their time to help bring boys and girls to the field, set them out in games, friendly games, and then they go on to play competitive games and so on and so forth. Many move away, many decide that it's not for them, but they've got an introduction to it, and many of those that just might not actually be footballers would have an affinity with the club, would help out in an administrative role, fundraising role, in some sort of volunteer role. You have them, and they will always give great support. And I think that's the best thing about the GAA nowadays. It's all encompassing.
Okay, great. So moving forward, a big ask. What would be the next 50 years in GAA? How do you see it develop?
Well, that's a very good question, Áine.
Just, you know, like
yeah,
it's
very good question. The biggest problem that I would see going forward is that the difficulty for a lot of counties to compete at a high level. Dublin and Kerry are always going to be there. Likewise, other big counties, I think like Galway, Mayo, even though they haven't been successful, and Cork are examples. Meath, while they haven't certainly been successful in this last 20 or 30 years, or so, 20 years anyway, so they are a huge county. Kildare likewise. Those big counties have the population, and it's inevitable that with coaching and training that they will come again at some stage. Smaller counties will find it that much more difficult to make the breakthrough, and I suppose that is something that has to exercise the minds of administrators going forward. Likewise, when you, in the same vein of conversation, the movement of people to the East Coast, the size of the computer belt around Dublin, as opposed to rural areas in West Cavan, Leitrim, and further west you go. Rural areas that are denuded of population, clubs are struggling in those areas, and they need help and they need action.
Yeah.
I think, and that's a challenge as well.
That's a struggle for another day.
It is,
perhaps.
it is, yeah.
What to recap, Breffni Park to Kingspan Breffni, the history of Breffni Park, 100 years old, just actually this month. George Cartwright, that's your fourth book, and thank you. And if you were to do a fifth, what would it be about?
Áine, I am going to take a long rest after having spent quite a bit of time at that. So I have never not even dreamed to think about it at this stage. I'm basking having done that one, and I'm going to stay like that.
Well done on doing it on such a quick time as well. Well, there you have it, folks. As you heard, an in-depth history, researched history into all you ever wanted to know, how it came about. There it is in Breffni Park to Kingspan Breffni. In
some selected bookstores. Yeah, it's actually in Candlelight. Bookshops, the relatively new bookshop opposite the Farnham, and it's in some selected shops around the county.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it's also for sale in Kingspan Breffni as well.
Kingspan Breffni, that's where you go to get the book.
And it will be in more places going forward.
Yeah, great book, fantastic pictures in there as well, a great history, and nice and easy to read as well. Well done, and thank you very much once again, George, for coming in to talk to us on Cavan TV. Thank you, and well done.
Thank you very much, Áine.